Pros and cons. So look, how if you're going to describe Bont shoes in one word, it would have to be polarizing.
Okay.
And so your experience has mirrored mine very, very closely with these shoes. Some people love them and other people hate them, and there's not a lot of room in between, right? So let's talk about pros. The pros of Bonts. They're nice and light. They're very stiff, right? They have quite a wide toe box. So if you've got a reasonably broad foot, they tend to fit your foot reasonably well. But the lightness and the stiffness is often what attracts people to them. And the heel cup tends to be very rigid, right? So if you're a person who likes having your rear foot really held really hard, because the carbon comes way up the back, it is just solid, right? The other curious thing about their design, which is really what's different with Bonts, the main thing that's different at least compared to a shoe with a synthetic upper that's stitched or glued around the bottom, is what they call the bathtub construction. And a couple of other shoes have got this, but it's really what Bonts are known for. So if we take the upper and we bend it there, you can see that the carbon comes right up around the outside. And in the heel, it comes like way up to the top. So that carbon is fairly inflexible. The carbon bathtub creates basically like a U shape, right? Which makes the sole of the shoe act like an incredibly rigid beam. So if you try and deflect a Bont like this or twist it, it's not moving. They are very stiff, right? Pros and cons. The pro of being very stiff is that it's really stiff and the power transfer feels great and the sole is really thin, so it's got a really low effective stack height. The negative with the bathtub construction, and this is where they become polarizing. If you have a very prominent first metatarsal head, which is the base of your big toe, which has got a bit of a calcific lip to it from a bit of arthritis, or you've just got a lumpy toe, or your fifth metatarsal
Bit of gout.
A bit of gout, bit of arthritis, bit of wear and tear. Some people just got lumpy toe joints, right? If you've got a fifth metatarsal with a bit of a bump on it or something, anything which touches that carbon bathtub on the inside tends to viciously rub on it, right? And so the upper of a shoe, for example, like this crusty old Lake 237 of mine, which I bought in 2013 or something, which has only recently been retired. The upper, if you've got a lump or bump, it will deform around the lump or the bump. It'll flex a little bit, right? You can see the carbon kind of stops. Right? So the upper of the shoe, which in this case is leather, will deform around those lumps and bumps a little bit. And it will make them tolerable. That ain't gonna deform. No. So the carbon doesn't bend. Now everyone out there will be screaming at every Bont fanboy is going to be screaming at me, but you can heat mold them, Neill.
Yes.
You can put them in the oven and turn them into a sock. A sock of immense proportions. It's the comfortablest thing in the world. That's not true.
Okay.
The guys, the people who sort of are massive proponents of them, who are selling them in shops, will always tell you that, it doesn't matter if it's a bit uncomfortable, we'll just heat mold it to your foot, right? They, in my experience, if they don't feel good when you first put them on, heat molding them will improve them 5 to 10% in terms of that comfort. They don't mold that much. It's not like you can pull it apart and turn it into a different shape, right? You can very slightly change some of the shape. But if you've got a big lump or bump somewhere on your foot and it's pressing into that side of that carbon bathtub, it's not going to get a hell of a lot better once you mold it. So this is why they're polarizing, because people with weird feet with lumps and bumps on them don't tend to like them that much.
I've got a wide foot, and maybe that's why those shoes have worked well for me, I'm thinking.
Quite a wide toe box.
Yeah.
And, your foot mustn't have any sort of really weird lumps or bumps or anything.
Not at this stage.
Nothing too weird.
Give it 10 years and we'll see.
Yes, give it 10 years. So, look, the other thing that's polarizing, I guess, about them is the arch support. So they do have, some people describe it as quite a strong arch built in. Other people, depending upon the shape of their foot, they describe it as not being much of an arch. The new versions are coming with 3 different insoles here, a high, a medium, and a low, which is really cool. I think that's a great idea. The highest one that they make is still not high enough, in my opinion, for people with really high arches. But these will suit a wide variety of people. And I think think that's a great innovation. More shoe manufacturers should do that, because it would just allow you to dial in the arch support more accurately. And Bonts have a bit of a weird last, so you can see this insole's got quite a big taper in here. It's really narrow. It's just due to the shape of the bottom of the shoe and the way it's constructed. So if you're putting an aftermarket insole in them, they're a bit awkward. They often don't fit that well. So these, which are actually made for the Bonts, are great. I think it's a great idea. So that, they have their pros and cons. Look, if you've got a broad foot, the other thing we should talk about is the rigidity.
Okay.
Some people's feet, if you've got a hyper mobile foot that deforms a lot and splays a lot, the rigidity in some of the shoe, in some cases, becomes a bit of a liability.
Okay.
Sometimes you want a shoe that actually deflects a little bit with your foot and actually has a little bit of give, because they can just be too harsh.
Right.
Yeah, I find people with really rigid feet, these are feet that when they put their foot on the ground, the arch doesn't deform at all.
Yep.
It just like a piece of wood,
Right.
doesn't extend the first ray, doesn't drop through the arch. They tend to like these more than people with really mobile feet. Yeah,
Right.
whose feet like to splay. Yeah, and we could argue about which person has the better foot, but they're just different, right?
Yeah.
So people with really rigid feet tend to like these, and people with feet that splay a lot, they find them a bit harsh.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Did you ever recommend them to anyone in your clinic?
All the time.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And what's the typical person that it suits?
Broad forefoot, no weird lumps and bumps, rigid foot, racing. So if the person's racing and they're trying to shave weight off here and look for maximum power transfer and all that sort of stuff, those are the 4 criteria.
Okay.
Yeah. And the less of those you meet, the less good they are. Now, I should have a little whinge while we're on this topic.
Yep.
The 3 captive nuts inside,
Yep.
if Mr. Bont is watching, whoever makes these,
Yes.
the 3 captive T-nuts, the M5 T-nuts, which are placed inside these, I believe I don't know if they've fixed it in the new model, maybe they have, but in years gone by, they were a zinc-coated mild steel and they would rust.
Yes.
Particularly for triathletes, right? These guys, their feet are sweating a lot, they're not wearing socks, or they're getting out of the water and the salt water's getting
So
in.
you can't get cleats off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cleat screw and the captive nut become one.
I had that issue with the older version of those. I'm not sure if it's prevalent on these.
I have a feeling with the brand new models, I think they might have finally gone to a stainless T-nut.
Okay.
And look, stainless, the thread is much better anyway. It's much stronger thread because it's a better material, but hopefully it won't rust. So a polarizing shoe, but yeah, great for the right person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not so great. Like I hate them because my foot's lumpy and bumpy and it's very mobile.
Yeah.
And I've tried them on and it feels terrible. But for obviously for you, they're brilliant. Yeah. So horses for courses again, mate. There is no one statement you can ever make about a shoe which perfectly works for everyone.
Yeah.
There is only what works for that person. And if these are working for you, yeah, stick with them because they're a great shoe in their own way.